Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition, and today we are going to talk about ideology and biology. Actually, I was going to talk about something else, but I was listening to something just before I got on camera, and someone said that. And the quote he said was, "Biology doesn't care about your ideology." And I was like, well, that sounds like a one perception, maybe more of a human perception. So we're gonna talk about that one a little bit, because what you're gonna find you're gonna do when you start operating in higher consciousness, when you start living from those aspects, you don't go on and debunk what somebody says, in a sense, because in one perception that is correct, right? In one perception, in human perception, that might be a statement that someone could agree with. Kind of like time is undefeated. That's another one that it kind of puts you as an enemy with time, but that is another phrasal here, right? And from one perspective, that is true. But when we talk about kind of leaving collectives, we talk about weakening a collective, almost in the same thing. You're weakening beliefs when you do that too. You leave the collective, and what I will normally do when I see something like that, I put out content that will show a different perspective on it, instead of arguing about someone else's perspective. Because technically their perspective's not wrong. Technically there's never a wrong or right. It's just the perception you're in, the vibration you're viewing it from, the frequency you're looking at it at. So we're going to kind of dive into that one. And I've done a couple of things I think that touched on this, but I thought that was summed up perfectly, when they said that. And I would say, from the perception of which I look at things, biology 100% cares about your ideology, because your ideology is how we feel about stuff, what our beliefs are about something, what we feel is correct, in a sense. I don't really like the word correct, but I'm going to use it here to make the point. What we put a lot of, and faith, I don't like that word either. These are very kind of weak words, hope and faith. If we're ever in a reality and we're putting it on hope and faith, then we're already in a reality where it's starting to crumble and we don't see it yet. Trust is a better word. If we can move from hope and faith to trust in the reality, that's different. Usually when we're on hope and faith, we're trying to cling to something that is on its way out. But we're going to hope it's going to have this 180-degree turnaround. But our realities don't have 180-degree turnarounds. Our realities get deconstructed and reconstructed. They get created a different way. They get morphed and shaped how we shift our frequency, how we shift what we're doing in the reality, how we view the reality. That's how things shift. It's not on hope and faith. So when we're on hope and faith, we're normally trying to cling to something that's not aligned. We're clinging to something that's not going to come in the way we want it to, because we're not in the frequency to do that. So when we talk about biology, what influences our biology? What we surround ourselves with, what we believe in, influences our biology. It influences our DNA. And there's, even in the human realms of science, this is what they will say about human cells, right? They are 100% affected by the environment. The environment you put them in, they have a morphing on that. They will shift. They won't, I'm going to say mutate based on that, right? Now I'm going to take it a step farther than just mutating, but they're going to shift to adhere to that ideology, whatever it is. Because a lot of people will also say, and which is true, thoughts create your reality. But what we also don't understand is it's not just a thought. Thoughts are very important and they do create our realities, but our core beliefs do too. And that's what our body sets in. So when we start to talk about different things that shift your DNA, when you expose your body to higher consciousness material, you are putting your body in an environment to morph to higher consciousness DNA, to shift out of DNA, to purge your human programming, to purge your human DNA. I mean, if we think about what chemotherapy does, that destroys human DNA. That's what it's supposed to do. And a lot of people look at that as, this is going to be kind of a touchy subject depending on, where your beliefs are on certain things. But a lot of people choose that route, choose those realities to quickly get rid of human DNA very quickly, you know, and then it's a choice. And everything we put our bodies through is a choice, and every reality we set up for ourselves is a choice. The question is when you and then when you have all the vomiting and all that stuff that comes from those types of purges, those type of realities, you're vomiting up all the human DNA that is technically toxic to the body. Now, if you continue to set yourself in a human environment, you just continue to recode with human DNA. And that's why a lot of times that will be an awakening for a lot of people. That is a lot of people's awakening when we go through some type of, health issue where they have to go through some type of treatment. That can be an awakening that a lot of people will put in their human design, to push them to something else, to move them to something else. That is what they'll start to do. There's not a coincidence that a lot of people who come out of those types of treatments lose their hair. They start to look more like their galactic counterparts, because it's a galactic remembrance. A lot of the science that have come through, a lot of things that come through are from galactic intelligence. That's what I'm trying to get to. A galactic intelligence. A lot of things that come through that way. Come through in the dream state. They're kind of discovered. They get to a basically their body, people who discover them, they get their body to a frequency where that information is. But it's all to push humanity forward. And some people go that route, some people go other routes. But it does affect the body. And when we say that our ideology doesn't matter with biology, it is 100% the driving force. What's going to happen is the more you expose your body to higher consciousness material, the more you surround yourself with higher vibrational things, your body's frequency starts to change, which starts to morph the body and morph the DNA. We've talked before about 90% of our DNA, human scientists will label, and I'm going to just say human perspective, someone in that making choices from that consciousness would say it's 90% junk. The DNA doesn't matter. Well, if we really believe our body is made up of 90% of junk, it's just in that, and that's true in in the human frequency, that DNA doesn't matter because it's not active. It hasn't been activated. It hasn't started to unravel. It hasn't started to be activated. So you haven't, and when you start activating that part of your DNA, you start opening yourself up to more of your gifts. You start opening yourself up to remembering. Your ancient memories come from that DNA, those DNA strands. You start opening yourself up to multidimensionality. You start opening yourself up to all these things. Your body does start to morph. There's this saying when people will get ready to transcend, leave the body. They'll get that spark of all of a sudden they look younger, they look great right before they go. And it can be confusing to a lot of people because, one day they're talking to someone who was very, getting ready to leave, maybe very, air quote, ill. They're getting ready to transcend into, the next phase for them. And then they see them the next day and look terrific. The next day they're gone. And like, what happens? What causes that influx? They're glowing, they look younger, they look better than they've looked in years. It's the soul entering the body. Because our soul is outside the body. If you have all that human DNA in there, your human soul can't exist in there. It's outside the body. So in the end, when all that human is starting to die off, in a sense, the body is starting to give out because it's so separated from the soul. It can only survive for so long. That's really part of the human experience, the human experiment. If you're in your galactic phase, you might resonate more with it being said that way. That the body starts to die off and the soul will come in, and that just kind of escalates it further because the more the body starts to die off, the soul comes in. It's almost an influx of too much, and it pulls the body away. It pulls the soul away from the body. So the soul comes in, so it can kind of. The word I'm getting is kind of rupture the whole thing, and that sounds a little visceral, but. We'll go there. It kind of ruptures the whole thing in a sense. Everything kind of all of a sudden explodes. But when they have that surgence of the soul and they look so amazing and they're glowing and everyone's like, oh, they look like they're getting better. It's also a parting gift. There's a lot of reasons it happens. It's also a parting gift for the people they leave, that they can remember them like that. So you hear about that all the time. But that's another thing when you're seeing the biology shift of the body, and people will say, well, does that really happen? Do people really de-age? Do you all of a sudden there is no human sickness anymore because your body can repair, and human sickness is really just the distortion of not expressing, not clearing all of our human stuff. That's what leads us to a lot of these human diagnoses. A lot of it is just really us trying to purge the body, but we want to continue to stop that. We don't like the pain of that. We don't like the way it feels. We don't like the way it looks. So we want to stop that. We don't want to go through that. So there's almost a condition put on everything from the human perspective. So when we start looking at how much will our biology shift, your biology will shift a lot. The higher you go in consciousness, the higher you can raise your body's vibration. You will find you will have days where you can be out in the sun, other days you can't be out in the sun. Your body starts to get charged more by the sun. You'll have different foods. Like, my diet is not like a normal person's diet. I mean, I eat kind of whatever I feel like my body needs. Some days I just want to eat potato chips. Other days I usually eat tons of dark chocolate, like all the time. Like, that's a constant thing for me. I have bars and bars and bars of dark chocolate in my refrigerator, more so than most people would think I would be ingesting, but I ingest large quantities of it because it does activate your third eye. It activates your pituitary gland. There's a lot of chemical things that go on. That's why consciousness and ascension is so tough for the body, because it is trying to morph, it is shifting, it is recoding your body. That's when we talk about going through template wipes and we reminisce about something and all of a sudden we don't care about anything. Our whole template's getting reset to a new template, but the body template gets wiped. That's why we go through different parts of our process where we don't really have an attachment to things. We don't really have the emotion. We can go through what would feel like a human tragedy and we don't have the emotion of it. One, we're kind of in a detached phase, and we can see it from a different perspective as to why it had to happen. So we don't have that visceral feeling for it. We kind of can watch everything from, above, looking down on it, and not looking down on it in a better perspective, but looking down on it from a consciousness perspective. We can understand why it has to happen that way. We understand why that was important. Why that was a linchpin in that reality that had to go to move everyone else in that reality forward, that we're kind of going to be stuck. And that was the one person that exiting that reality is going to be massive for these other 18 people that are in the reality. And that was the agreement that person that exited the reality had, that they would do that. So we really want to look at, where do we believe some of the stuff we hear? Because every kind of human saying, now I'm not saying there's some funny human sayings that are true, that are kind of a metaphor for consciousness. There are some like that. And I think, like, don't count their chickens before they hatch. I did a whole video on that one. There are some that kind of ring true in a different perspective. There's also some that we go the opposite way on them after a while and go, that doesn't even sound right. I don't even feel like that's correct. I don't know if that's how I would view that anymore. I don't know if that's how I would feel about that anymore. So look at what you surround your body with. Look at the changes your body starts to go through. Look at how your diet starts to change. Look at how you start to feel about when you start to hear people talk about different medical stuff. Are you starting to correlate that to their body's vibration raising? When you see people going through certain things, look at it from a different perspective. If we keep continuing to look at everything from a human perspective, we're not expanding our mind. A lot of the videos people will put out, I know I'll put out, you're supposed to expand your mind to say, well, let me go down that rabbit hole a little bit. Let me explore that topic. Let me just not say, well, okay, that's this or that's that. It's not going to be. Everything is not good or bad. It doesn't matter. The soul does not see good or bad. Universal law does not see good or bad. Cosmic law does not see good or bad. It doesn't care about any of those things our human gets bogged down on. There's no right, there's no wrong. There's a divine plan on why everything happens, and the divinity of ourselves. There's no other divinity out there. There's no one else to look at saying, oh, they created everything. We created everything. And everything that goes in our reality, we created, we're responsible for. We're putting our bodies through what we're putting our bodies through. If we believe something, we are now solidifying that in our body. That's why it takes so long for the realities to start to shift when we start going through ascension, getting our body vibration up, because we have so much human stuff in the body we have to purge. So much stuff, so much programming. And when you're in the middle of purging that stuff and getting rid of that stuff, and it never ends, we're always going to be doing it. It just gets to where we know we're doing it, we can do it quicker. We kind of go all into the clearing. We're not as We don't have as much emotion that comes up with it anymore as we kind of will in the beginning of a lot of this stuff. For the first, maybe 4 or 5 years we're doing it, because it is a year-long process, and the human body will start to repair. But that doesn't happen overnight, because you have to look at how many years you've subjected yourself to human consciousness, how long you put your body in that, how long you put your body through that. And then look now at how long you're going to have to immerse your body in higher consciousness stuff for the repair work to begin, for your galactic DNA to activate, for you to start having all these conscious awarenesses, remembrances. It's not an overnight process, but we are very much affected by our beliefs in something. And when I hear someone say that's the only way, or they're listening to a very human perspective on that, like this is the human way, this is how the human way it has to be done. There's a zillion other ways to do it. There's a zillion other ways to look at it. The question is, how many can we see when we look at something? How many realities do we see? Or do we just see the one? Or can we see the 6,000 more? So, all right, I'm going to leave you with that today. Keep practicing the art of intuition.